presentation of our bills and a more efficient, I'm hopeful, Senator Allen. Let's move on to item number 14.
So, Senator, continuing with my my tendency to avoid issues of controversy, I'm now turning to underground injection wells. So this is.
We were there.
I'm just increasing the tourism for Sacramento, I think. But this is SB 454, which has to do with groundwater protection. And so this bill establishes criteria to protect California's precious groundwater aquifers from the waste pollution resulting from oil and gas extraction operations. Now, under the Safe Drinking Water Act, before DOGGR can permit an oil company to drill a wastewater disposal or chemical injection well into an aquifer, California must obtain an exemption from the act for that aquifer from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. EPA. Now, however, as we have all been following, DOGGR allowed a large number of wastewater disposal and injection wells to be drilled into aquifers that have not been exempted from the Safe Drinking Act and therefore should have been protected. The fluids being injected into these aquifers contain a toxic cocktail of chemicals, including benzene, arsenic, and radioactive materials. Many of these chemicals are known to cause cancer and other human health problems. Some of them are naturally occurring, many of them are naturally occurring, but that still doesn't detract from the serious consequences, the dangers associated with the chemicals. So DOGGR has proposed a plan and process to examine these aquifers and seek exemptions from the Safe Drinking Water Act for those aquifers the agencies believe qualify for an exemption. According to this proposed plan, DOGGR will request exemptions for aquifers that cannot, quote, reasonably be expected to be used for beneficial uses. However, the criteria DOGGR is using to make this determination does not consider California's current severe drought or the reality of future water shortages. So it's clear that going forward, given California's long-term water challenges, the state will need to access deeper aquifers and adopt and develop the technology necessary to utilize water that we might not consider feasible today. We continue to grow, our climate continues to change, and our water challenges will not go away. So it's my belief that given both the current water crisis and also the almost inevitable trajectory of the water crisis moving forward, not only on the medium term, but on the long term, it would be irresponsible and short-sighted to not protect an aquifer today, even if it's not currently being used for drinking water. SB 454 requires DOGGR to work jointly with the State Water Resources Control Board, we're seeing a theme here, and put specific criteria in place to guide DOGGR and the board in determining which of California's protected aquifers should be eligible for consideration for an exemption from the Safe Drinking Water Act, bearing in mind whether or not the aquifer should be maintained as a future water supply, given the critical need to develop new water sources. Under this bill, the hydrocarbon-bearing aquifers, the agencies, for hydrocarbon-bearing aquifers, the agencies must ensure the aquifer is geographically isolated, so discharge water cannot contaminate nearby aquifers. Also, any discharge into the aquifer cannot negatively impact any potential beneficial uses of the water in the aquifer. Now, for non-hydrocarbon-bearing aquifers, the total dissolved solids content of the water in the aquifer cannot be below 3,000 milligrams per liter. The aquifer must be geographically isolated, and the board must determine that the injection of the discharge water will not contaminate a source of water that has current or potential future beneficial use. Given, as I said, given the critical drought the state is facing, we just don't have the luxury to be short-sighted when determining which of our water resources should be protected. This bill ensures that California's future water needs are considered when determining the appropriate location for oil and gas production and wastewater wells. With me today, I have Andrew Grinberg with Clean Water Action and Bill Alayoud.
Alayoud.
Yes. Yeah, Alayoud, French name, right? Alayoud, they don't pronounce the D's, with Environmental Working Group to speak in support and assist in answering any questions. And it looks like you may have a question.
Well, gentlemen, the current law doesn't allow the aquifers with 3,000 DTS to be compromised. So can you clarify in the proposals? I mean, there's a difference between Dogger and in connection with the State Water Resource Board complying with what we believe is the law now. So if you can clarify that, because I believe that much of this is already the law.
We will. Bill Alio with the Environmental Working Group. I'll stay at the higher level and turn it over to Mr. Grinberg to answer that question specifically. Is that some may ask or say, why are we even doing why is the Senator doing the bill? And that Dogger and the State Board are on this. They're working with US EPA Region 9. Why do it? Well, the two authors in the room who broke ground on this issue, AB 591 with Mr. Wachowski in the Assembly, and then Senator Pavley's SB 4 took it across the finish line, got Dogger to say, we're going to start regulating better at something. We weren't regulating it at all. So we could say, let's wait and see what happens with the UIC. I would argue that it's appropriate that this legislature still needs to provide guidance and set side rails to Dogger and the State Board to make sure they do what you think they ought to do as the policymakers in the state. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Grinberg.
Thank you. Andrew Grinberg. I'm the Oil and Gas Program Manager for Clean Water Action. I would just like to build on the comments made by Bill Alliot here. This bill builds on SB 4 and brings in more interagency cooperation, which in our view was one of the things that was lacking and that really got us into this mess in the first place, as members of this committee know very well. This bill is meant to protect all beneficial uses of groundwater, whether it's drinking or irrigation, and that beneficial uses is clearly defined in statute in the Water Code. That's one of the points of contention that keeps coming up in opposition, is that that's not defined. We believe that it is. This bill puts in statute the solutions that we need in order to be more forward-thinking about which waters we should be protecting. The criteria for exempting aquifers is based on a reality of California, and actually national water in the 1980s, not the reality of California's water situation here in 2015. Aquifers with less than 3,000 TDS, to answer your question, can be exempted under the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act. This bill would ensure that California isn't writing off those high-quality aquifers, not submitting them to EPA, which throughout this saga, we've seen that EPA actually has their fair share of blame as well. It's not just that Dogger was falling down on the job, it was also the federal government. So this will ensure that there is more forethought, better consideration of the realities of California's water supply. So for those reasons, we urge an aye vote.
Yeah, well, certainly bringing the State Water Resource Board in earlier than, as we heard from the testimony, that once the decision's been made, then from Dogger that they're going to exempt a well, then they were brought in. That's a little different characterization. Others in support? Let's hear from you. Efficiently.
Good afternoon. Kyle Jones of Sierra Club, California, in strong support of this matter.
Thank you.
Kelly Dale on behalf of California Conservation Voters in support.
Amy Trainer on behalf of the West Marin Environmental Action Committee in support.
Opposition to SB 454.
Mr. Chairman and members, Eli Garcia for the Western States Petroleum Association. We are in opposition and are talking to the senator and his staff, and we will be meeting soon on some of the details, and we appreciate that opportunity. I do feel I was perfectly prepared to come in and just say one line and get out of here in the interest of your time and interest of a low likelihood of success here. But I do think it's important to correct a couple of points here. First of all, yes, understood.
It is the EQ.
Understood, but I think there's a couple of factual issues I think we need to clarify. You asked a very important question, Mr. Chairman. Do we allow below 3,000 TDS as potentially exempt aquifers? I think Mr. Greensburg referred to them as high-quality aquifers that we shouldn't write off. What's missing in Senator Allen's bill, and what makes it inconsistent with the state response plan, that is a joint response plan from not only the Division of Oil and Gas, but the State Water Resources Control Board. What's missing here is the critical exemption that's allowed for in the under federal guidelines, which is if it's below 3,000 TDS, and if it's situated at a depth or location which makes recovery of water for drinking water purposes economically or technologically impractical, and if it is so contaminated that would be economically or technologically impractical to render that water fit for human consumption, then it's exempt. We've stricken that language out here, which means that we are willing to go into groundwater aquifers that we know are so contaminated and they are economically and technologically infeasible to recover that water. That's what's missing here, and why there is critical inconsistencies with the response plan. I'm not sure why we're looking at aquifers. I know we keep hearing drought, but I would ask you to just think for a moment about large oil fields where most of the oil is recovered in California. You're actually proposing that you're going to go into those oil fields and find a drop of water there that could be used at some point in the future for some beneficial use. And contrary to some of the statements earlier, there isn't a single beneficial use definition in law. There are multiple beneficial use definitions in law. Some are narrow, some are broad. We should be consistent in how we use that terminology. Finally, one point that this administration is making today in this year's budget is we need to first make sure that we know where all the freshwater aquifers are. We don't know that. We need more information. Oil developers need that information. The Division of Oil and Gas needs that information so that we know exactly which aquifers we should stay away from in proximity, that we should protect through zonal isolation of the resources. We don't have that information. You're proposing in this bill to go really deep into an oil field to find potentially someday water that you might use when you don't know about the water that you know you're using today. You don't have that information. I would suggest that you get that information first. It'll be important to you as policymakers, to our members as oil producers, to make sure that we protect what we know is fresh water that is being used today. This approach approaches it backwards and is inconsistent with the response plan, the joint response plan, again, from the State Water Resource Control Board, the Division of Oil and Gas, and which has been accepted by US EPA, and for which there will be subsequent regulatory actions which will take place starting this upcoming month and throughout the summer, which will be completed long before this legislation would take effect. And so some of those inconsistencies also concern us. Again, I intend to just come in here and say a few words, but I think there were some factual issues that we need to clarify, and we're happy to continue to work with the senator on these issues.
You raised a good point about the reconciliation with these other contaminants other than the 3,000 TDS that render a well. I think that the other concern is that as the legislation is going through and we have these, Dogger is looking at the wells and these aquifers that may have, some fresh water. We're not saying that the oil community knew about it. If Dogger says you can use this well, you use it, and it's fine. That's a different issue. We're just saying if they say no. They say no, then they say no, right?
Mr. Chairman, I think one of the points I'm remiss by not bringing up, we have this issue, just to make sure everyone is clear, was largely a record-keeping issue that came out of an audit. That means a federal agency auditing the state agencies. It's not incident-driven. There has not been a single incident of a contaminated aquifer that we're discussing here. We're talking about a lot of potentials, a lot of maybes, but it's all off of a record-keeping issue that we agree needs to be updated. The Division of Oil and Gas needs to update its record-keeping capability. We are putting more and more requirements on them, not only for us as producers to provide information, but for them to make it available to the public. That's an entirely new concept that we need to make sure that they're upgraded for. And so we've mentioned both in Senator Pavley's bill and in Senator Jackson's bill and others, we agree we need to make sure that they have the resources to upgrade their data management system and should do so as fast as possible.
Next witness opposed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. P. Anthony Thomas, representing the California Independent Petroleum Association. First of all, Mr. Chairman, I think I want to recommend you for the Patience of Job Award, to be very honest with you. So kudos to you and your patience with all of us. Yes, there's a water crisis, and we are surely obligated not to impact groundwater, and I think that's clear and understood. But in our view, we don't believe that 454 actually addresses those issues. First and foremost, in our testimony in natural resources, and again, to my counterparts' point, we understand what committee we're in and the likelihood that this bill will move on. But that said, one of the things that what we're concerned about is section 113, lines 3 through 7. Called for the division not to submit a proposal for an aquifer exemption, I should say, to the EPA unless Dogger and the Water Board concur, which is already a requirement in the state plan. But again, what we're concerned about, the bill sets no time deadlines. The bill sets no anything insofar as when does this cease. So it's hard for industry to comply with something that doesn't have specific direction. And without specific direction, things can be interpreted. And when things are interpreted, and that means that usually someone's going to fall short of their goals, namely and specifically industry. Again, I want to reiterate that there's the term beneficial use is mentioned 6 times in the bill, but there is no definition of beneficial use in the bill. When SB 4 was passed, it did put in place the first of its kind. And there were many, many opinions. As a matter of fact, I think that we discussed this with Senator Pavley. Everyone walked away unhappy. So that must have been a good thing. It was a compromise. Perfect bill. Perfect bill. No one liked it. Exactly. But that said, if the bill is to provide direction to the regulatory agencies, then maybe those folks should actually be on the negotiations, or at least provide their opinion on what will in fact work. This bill does not do that. So we're asking, with all due respect, that the bill be held. We're asking that if in fact some specifics can be placed in the bill on time deadlines, or at least some feedback from the agencies, maybe it's palatable. It does lack depth. It does lack direction as well as substance. From a policy standpoint, we don't believe that the bill is ready. From a regulatory standpoint, we don't think the bill is the directive. So we stand opposed to it and ask for your no vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good. Others opposed to SB 454? Right, let's return to committee. Questions of the author? There's been friendly suggestion that you scrub some of the language to give people more direction. Would you like to close?
Well, we have had a chance to chat a little bit with the opponents, and actually I agree with them on the timeline issue. We want to make sure we have a fair timeline in place. As we discussed in natural resources, the old timeline was 10 days, so that when the Water Board did not respond within 10 days, then it was allowed. We don't. So that's one problem. We don't want to create the opposite problem where a government agency sort of sits on these applications forever and doesn't allow the folks who want to extract and then re-inject. We don't want them to be unreasonable in preventing them from doing their work when and if they can actually get an exemption or a permit. We don't believe that this bill lacks depth. We actually believe that the bill is very simple. It's very clear. I think it's very clear what exactly it does. Yes, there was an audit that found a problem over at Dogger, but it really did uncover a culture of, at best, neglect on these kinds of environmental protection issues at Dogger. And this bill will give Dogger the direction it needs and engage the Water Board, which really does have the expertise and the mission to focus on water quality and focus on aquifer protection, with the power it needs to be a real part of this process of examining, determining, evaluating the impact of reinjection on those aquifers that we need now and that we will need in the future going forward, given California's tremendous drought problems both today and in the future. So that's what we seek to do here, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Yes.
Just a brief comment. When this made national news, that which has incentivized your bill, I very uncommonly heard from family members and friends from across the country saying, California's doing what? At a time of drought? Putting at risk your aquifers? And whether we're talking about a specific incident that's already occurred or not, we should not have to hear from EPA that we're at risk. And so this is a very thoughtful approach, and I agree with you, it's not complicated. Just setting up a standard so that we can be sure we don't hear from the EPA again. That's our job. It's not for them to catch us before we really mess up. So this is really important. And I think it stunned a lot of people that California of all places. So I'm in strong support of your bill.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
Chair will entertain any motion.
That's my motion.
There's a motion, do pass. Assistant, call the roll.
Item 14, SB 454 by Senator Allen. The motion is due pass and refer to Committee on Appropriations. Senators Wykowski?
Aye.
Wykowski, aye. Gaines? Bates? No. Bates, no. Hill? Aye. Hill, aye. Jackson? Aye. Jackson, aye. Leno?
Aye.
Leno, aye. Pavley? Aye. Pavley, aye.
Okay, it has 5-1. We'll keep the roll open. Let's move to item number 24. SB 687, a substance formerly known as biomethane. I figured it's not in the bill, I might as well say it.
Thank you, Mr.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just so enjoy being here with everyone. We come to you now with SB 687, which seeks to set a renewable gas standard for the state. California is an international leader in efforts to combat climate change. Our efforts have led not just to a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, but also has helped to create jobs, diversified our energy sector, and cleaned our air. We certainly talked a bit about this with the SB 3050 discussion this morning. Currently, California's gas sector causes 1/4 of the state's greenhouse gas emissions and is a major contributor to global warming. This bill, SB 687, seeks to lower the harmful impact of the gas sector by requiring the sellers of gas to begin using more renewable, less carbon-intensive gas. It asks the Air Resources Board to establish a carbon-based standard for California's gas supply modeled after the state's Renewable Portfolio Standard, the RPS, which has, of course, doubled renewable electricity use in just over a decade. And it's also based on a low-carbon fuel standard. This renewable gas standard will require an average carbon intensity reduction of 1% in 2020, increasing to 10% by 2030, and will include all gas used in the state, including gas used for transportation fuel and that which is put in the pipeline. This will offer several significant benefits to California. First, by replacing just 10% of California's natural gas with renewable gas, that alone would reduce California's greenhouse gas emissions by 12.6 million metric tons from fossil fuel displacement alone, putting us a big step forward toward meeting the goals of both AB and SB 32. The actual emissions reduction would be much greater due to upstream reductions in black carbon from reduced wildfire, for example. All the folks in the fire department want to find better uses for the disintegration of the forest waste, the kind of wood fuel that's up in the forest as they clear forests to reduce wildfire problems. It also will help on the upstream reductions in black carbon, but in addition, reduce methane emissions from dairies and other uncapped sources by encouraging the investment in digesters that help to capture biogas. Also, California currently imports 91% of its natural gas. By requiring the use of renewable gas, we will spur job creation throughout the state, at landfills, at wastewater treatment facilities, at biodigesters, everywhere where organic waste can be transformed into clean renewable gas right here in California. Under AB 1826, signed last year, food processors, restaurants, other businesses that produced organic food waste are now required to divert that waste. This bill, SB 687, creates a market for that waste. It also directs the Air Board, the PUC, and the CEC to coordinate incentives such as cap and trade revenues, the electricity program investment charge, and AB 118 funding to help meet this new renewable gas standard. It will help reduce the cost of renewable gas as the market grows. That's what's so important here, creating a market that will lower costs. Also, in the Senate Energy Committee, I took amendments which include cost containment language to further ensure the cost of renewable gas does not become an unreasonable burden. The RPS and the LCFS, even our electric vehicle programs, use a combination of incentives and mandates to drive the market. We need both to reduce the carbon intensity of the gas sector. This bill employs a market-based approach that is technology neutral, and since it is performance-based, developers will focus on providing the lowest carbon gas in the most cost-effective manner I'm happy to accept the amendments that were outlined in the analysis, which give the Air Board more time to develop the renewable gas standard. I think that's absolutely reasonable. With me today, I have Julia Levin with the Bioenergy Association of California and Ryan Kenny with Clean Energy Fuels to speak to the bill and help to answer questions.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm the executive director of the Bioenergy Association of California. We represent about 60 private companies, public agencies, and local governments up and down the state that are working to convert organic waste to energy for many of the reasons that Senator Allen mentioned. In addition to providing really significant greenhouse gas reductions, California can produce 2.5 billion gallons of the lowest carbon transportation fuels in existence from organic waste. In fact, the very lowest carbon transportation of any kind is made from the waste that's diverted, the organic waste that's diverted away from landfills and then used to produce transportation fuel. It's significantly lower carbon per mile, even than electric and fuel cell vehicles. In addition to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, though, by putting biogas, renewable gas, into our heaviest duty, dirtiest trucks, we can provide immediate and significant air quality benefits. These are the vehicles that are the dirtiest vehicles on the road, and there are no electric and fuel cell alternatives on the market at this time. There are, however, natural gas trucks that can replace the dirtiest vehicles off-road and on-road and provide immediate air quality benefits in the most impacted communities in the South Coast Air District, in the San Joaquin Valley, communities that are really suffering from pollution caused largely by diesel vehicles. In addition, this bill will help to meet California's landfill diversion goals, AB 1826 and AB 1594. The most valuable biogas is the gas from diverted organic waste. It's the lowest carbon, and this bill will incentivize it. And finally, by producing renewable gas, you also produce a number of beneficial byproducts that can be used in place of petroleum-based fertilizers. Biosolids, biochar, and digestate are all very beneficial byproducts of the bioenergy or biogas production process. They can be used to improve soil quality, conserve water, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions from petroleum-based fertilizers. So for all of these incredible environmental benefits, we urge the committee to pass this bill. Thank you.
Senator Allen, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Ryan Kenny. I'm with Clean Energy Renewable Fuels. We are the nation's largest provider of renewable natural gas transportation fuel. In California, we have 65 public stations all providing renewable natural gas as either a blend with fossil natural gas or a complete substitute. As you know, renewable natural gas is sourced through the decomposition of organic materials, whether it's ag, food waste, landfills, wastewater treatment plants. After treated to remove carbon dioxide and other contaminants, it meets gas pipeline quality standards, and it's injected into the gas grid and sold through the pipeline for power generation, heat, industrial use, and transportation fuel. Transportation fuel, as I mentioned, is our business, and we do believe that is the best use of renewable natural gas. Renewable natural gas provides the lowest carbon fuel available out of all the transportation fuels. It is the most cost-effective for both medium and heavy-duty vehicles. It's 90% less greenhouse gas emissions, and it's 100% renewable. It's also, as you know, greenhouse gas emissions, 40% come from the transportation sector, and both the South Coast and San Joaquin Valley air basins have identified that as diesel as the #1 polluter in California. So renewable natural gas does have a significant story to tell and play with that remedy. Like the RPS and the LCFS, SB 687 would fill in the gap in California's clean energy and climate policies. It would require the state to diversify and decarbonize the gas sector. From a business standpoint, there's only one operational project in California injecting renewable natural gas into the California gas grid. And there are significant barriers such as cost and pipeline interconnection costs. And nowhere else in the country do we have these barriers within California. So the renewable gas standard would be a necessary precursor to California production, market development, and market certainty. So for these reasons, Clean Energy Renewable Fuels asked for your vote for the bill. Thank you.
Others in support of SB 687, please come forward. Identify yourselves.
Mr. Chairman and members, Jessica Gauger on behalf of the California Association of Sanitation Agencies and also the Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts. both are members of the Bioenergy Association of California in support of the bill. As was mentioned, wastewater agencies are producers of biogas and would benefit from the renewable gas standard. So we would urge your aye vote.
Thank you.
Marlene Dumaine with the East Bay Municipal Utility District in support.
Catherine Mitchell, TSS Consultants, in support of the bill. On behalf of our clients, who are businesses that are bioenergy project developers seeking to grow this new renewable natural gas industry in the state of California.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, Johannes Escudero with the Coalition for Renewable Natural Gas, an international trade association representing the industry. Our members produce 90% of the transportation fuel-grade renewable natural gas and as such support policy ideas such as SB 687 that incentivize further market development. We appreciate your consideration today.
Very good. Let's hear from the other point of view, from opposition on 687. Please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Michael Bocadoro with West Coast Advisors on behalf of the Agricultural Energy Consumers Association. Let me just start off by saying we're highly supportive of biogas. We work closely with the dairy industry in California, represent them on environmental issues, and have been at the forefront of efforts to build dairy digesters in California. We don't believe this bill hits the mark in terms of encouraging good dairy digester projects in California, and I'll get to that in a moment. But we're very supportive of additional bioenergy development in the state of California. Let me hit 2 points that I think were addressed in the analysis as concerns raised by the committee consultant. One, premature nature of this measure. This bill deals with methane. Its short-lived climate pollutants were covered under Senate Bill 605 last year. Requires CARB to come back to this legislature on January 1, 2016 with a plan on how to deal with methane. This bill gets far out ahead of that. We haven't even seen a concept paper, let alone a draft plan, let alone a final plan on how we best address methane issues in California, and this bill's going heavily down that path. We're also having discussions about what our clean energy and climate future are in California. The governor's executive order today, we have an effort, to use an analogy, we're building a house on what this is going to look like. But before we know the shape and size of that house, this bill is hanging wallpaper on walls that don't yet exist. So the first concern is we're very premature with where this bill's heading. It picks a pathway identified in the governor's and the administration's own analysis that is identified as the high-risk, high-cost pathway. And so one question has to be, why in the world are we going down the high-risk, high-cost pathway at this stage before we even know where we're headed? Second and bigger concern, I think, is really important for the committee. At the last hearing, we were told that the opponents didn't understand how the bill worked, that you don't actually have to put biomethane into a pipeline to qualify for the renewable gas credit. And so we explored that with Mr. Allen's legislative director. And what we've been told, and this is really important, is you can use biogas on one of my dairy members, create renewable electricity on site, sell that to the utility and generate a renewable energy credit, get paid 13 cents a kilowatt hour under Senate Bill 1122, and double dip and double credit the same exact project and get a renewable gas standard credit under this bill. So we're not putting 1 MMBTU of biomethane into a pipeline, yet we're generating a renewable gas credit that is going to cost gas utility ratepayers to purchase that credit. That has some very, very significant implications as well. You have to ask yourself, this bill actually discourages biomethane pipeline injection. Why in the world would I develop a dairy digester and put it, you're getting paid twice if you produce electricity. If you produce biomethane, you're only going to get paid once. So why in the world would I ever produce biomethane for the pipeline? I wouldn't. And no developer is going to do that. We heard a lot about forestry benefits. Forestry projects are biomass projects. They produce something entirely different than biomethane. They produce syngas, and they produce it up in the mountains where there are no biomethane pipelines to inject. So the concept, again, is to produce electricity projects and get a renewable gas credit. That is fundamentally flawed and runs against everything we've done with the RPS and other programs to ensure people aren't double crediting and double benefiting on the same project. So that is a huge fundamental flaw, and it has an environmental implication as well. it's better if I got a dairy digester to put the gas into the pipeline because I don't produce NOx locally when I burn it to produce on-site electricity. So this bill is actually encouraging on-site electricity production and encouraging NOx production in disadvantaged communities in the San Joaquin Valley. It's a huge problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Gil Topidi. I represent the California Municipal Utilities Association. My members, who are the locally owned public utilities, they are the non-core customers for these gas sellers. And I want to compliment your staff's good work in making what I consider a very thorough analysis covering a lot of the issues. And I kind of want to delve into a couple of those specific points raised in the analysis. And some of those issues that were raised were speaking to kind of the multiple definitions that Senator Allen's bill proposes to do on biogas. These are additional definitions that under AB 1900 Gatto that passed in 2013 created a definition for biogas. It just said a gas is produced by an anaerobic process. And then biomethane, which is not spelled out at all in the bill, biomethane is that quality of biogas that can then be safely injected into the pipeline system. So the bill speaks a lot to what a definition of biogas. It speaks to a new definition for what renewable gas is, and it uses some of the same language where for biomethane, that how it gets into the pipeline system and can be counted towards meeting the RPS, which is the concern for my members. It uses that same language for how meeting the RPG would work, the RGS, I'm sorry, the renewable gas standard, how the RGS would work. And so my confusion representing my members is we already now have a process to turn biomethane, which we want to diversify our fuels and include that within meeting the RPS. And now we've got an RGS, which the gas sellers have to comply with. But the gas sellers are the people we do business with. So are we also piggybacking on their ability to comply with the brand new standard mechanism to help foster producing renewable gas? We don't know where we play in. You've got an LCFS, low carbon fuel standard. You've got cap and trade program. You've got the RPS program. You'll have conceivably by the mechanics in this bill, yet another market to stimulate and help out this specific area. And then you heard from the witnesses the benefits that perhaps the best use of this resource is in the transportation sector. And already natural gas is going into fleets of vehicles. UPS has many of its vehicles now running on natural gas. So this is happening now. And then you have the proponent, Mr. Kinney, mentioned that there's only one facility right now that can purify this gas and put it into the pipeline. So if the purpose of the bill isn't to put it into the pipeline and also make it RPS eligible for my guys who want to go out and procure in-state renewable resources, it's not clear if it would do that. It's not clear whether or not we have to then have one tranche of biomethane gas count towards the RPS and another tranche of RGS count towards that my members then have to play in two different markets. One does not satisfy the other. If we play in biomethane, why cannot that not count towards RGS? Or do we have this issue of the double credit? Do I have to count it towards RPS if I get it? Or no, you can count it towards that market. It just doesn't seem like it's reconciled itself, and I thought these would be issues important for your committee to consider.
They are important. I have been called by the Health Committee to go present my bill since they're done and waiting for me. So I'm going to turn over to the rank. Is it done with you too? Yeah. Oh, we don't have a vice chair, so I can designate to anyone.